About a year ago, we talked with Sheriff Paul Penzone, the new Maricopa County Sheriff. We can't call you that anymore, so you're just the Sheriff of Maricopa County. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's a nice transition.
I want to talk about that transition. Some decisions you made riled some people up, and they were business decisions. Last time we talked, you weren't sure they were going to happen. Well, some of them have. Let's start with Tent City and the closing of Tent City.
Yeah, I think it's been a great success. There was never an issue with the volume, the population relocating them, but we had projected about a $4 million savings. And what we were able to do because of those savings is we reinstated the SRT team, it's like a SWAT team inside the jail. They de-escalate violence. They are an added layer of safety for the detention officers. We were able to add rovers. And I know this, when you talk about it, what does that even mean? We're so short on staff that our detention officers weren't even able to go to the restroom. So now we have rovers that give relief and to provide additional support for safety. We were able to buy pieces of technology that we needed. We were able to buy taser cartridges, all these little things that you don't think of, that if we can't pay for those internally, we go back to the board and ask the taxpayers to increase the budget, which I didn't want to do. So our savings has been reallocated, but most importantly for the staff, we've made the adjustment. There were no issues relative to the transition, and we were able to kind of supplement the staffing model inside the jails for the benefit of those detention officers that are at risk every day doing a tough job.
Well, I've talked often about officer safety on the street, and I know you were a law enforcement officer for years. My brother was a corrections officer in Florence, and it's a whole different ballgame, way outnumbered inside the jail system, whether it's the jails or the prison system. No weapons of any kind. Usually it's your verbal commands and ability to calm a situation. That's got to be tough when you're that outmanned and you can't get breaks. So it's officer safety now there's more numbers there, correct?
Yeah, and not only the elements that you're speaking of, which are extremely important, but just your ability to stay attentive, just your ability to be top of game, because if you don't, in any industry you work in, when you get a chance to catch your breath, to step away from it, you revive yourself. Can you imagine some of these detention officers, there may be 2 of them for 150 detainees, watching a camera 4 or 5 hours at a time, or in a pod, for a long period of time. They need relief. So it's a very tough, challenging job that most people aren't familiar with, but our detention officers are exceptional. But here's the interesting thing, Mike. We were looking at the statistics. This office, so the county has grown by about, I think, 13 or 14% in population since 2006. How much do you think the office has expanded in that time frame?
Oh, I couldn't even guess.
We haven't. I think it's 1 point total, none of which are on the, for deputies, we had 750 deputies back then, we have 750 deputies now. So this organization has run at that same capacity, although the population has grown considerably of our demands. And although the detention population has fallen, we still have added responsibilities that are new. So we have to find a way to grow this organization to meet the needs of our community.
So with that expansion, the possibilities, how quickly do you think you can get deputies hired and get them up to speed?
Oh, it usually takes about 2 years before they're truly productive, because that first year going through the academy, getting out on the street, learning, determining if they're going to make probation, and then becoming productive is about a 2-year cycle. But we just sent another academy class out with deputies. We have one more coming down the pike, but for the first time in almost 3 years, our detention class, so the detention officers, was filled with 40 detention officers. It had taken us 3 years to get a full class, and we finally have gotten one. So we'll run 3 or 4 of those a year, and I think we're starting to see those gains.
I talked with the DPS director about the diversity of what he has to command, because from the urban areas to the very rural, I think the only other job in Arizona that's similar would be yours, because as the sheriff's office, you are in Maricopa County, so you're in Phoenix, but you're also in Buckeye, and you are in other places that are outside, very rural areas where backup is a long way off.
Oh, sure. There are times I'll go to visit a district or go to check on a circumstance, and I may be driving for an hour to get to the location while still in Maricopa County. So we have very, Queen Creek is an area of our responsibility. You look at it, it's a very sophisticated, populated community, much like Fountain Hills. And then you have other smaller communities like Guadalupe. Then you have the rural areas. So the diversity of responsibility for the men and women in this office is tremendous. And in one shift or one district, it might be just metropolitan. In another area, it's very rural. So they have to learn quite a bit, and they have to be able to be self-sufficient and independent, which we need to take care of them. So we need to make sure that they do have backup in close proximity, and that we give them the resources they need to be safe.
One of the places you were uniquely qualified was all your years in law enforcement, but there's a political side to being an elected sheriff and dealing with people. You covered that too with some of the other things you've done. Which has been more difficult for you?
Oh, the political side, absolutely. But I wouldn't say that it's just necessarily, I'm not the only one that would deal with these dynamics. I'm going to state this, if you don't mind, Mike. Politically across our nation, I think we've lost sight of what it means to be a public servant first. We have to really work harder to everything that we do, that we're leading by example, everything that we do is meant to serve the population we're responsible for, and that our personal agendas, our politics, all those other factors cannot be considerations. We're teaching the next generation how to lead, and right now I'm concerned about what lesson we're teaching them. So it's unique, it's new for me. I'm trying my best to stay on course, but collectively as a community, I think we got to do more.
All right, so a couple of things, and we have one more segment. I'd like to talk about the DOJ oversight that you came into the office with, and where we're at with that, and also the changes you made with ICE in the jail and how that's going. So we'll cover those two things. Sheriff Penzone is with us. He is the Maricopa County Sheriff, and his first year in the office. We're going to find out how it's gone this last year on those two things, but also looking forward to the next 3 years at least. So we'll be back in a moment. We're with the Sheriff of Maricopa County, Paul Penzone. When you took office, the office was being controlled by the DOJ or by the federal courts in a couple of places. Where are we with that?
So when I took office, the majority of the areas of compliance were under 50% compliance, and the order says that they have to be in excess of 94%. So I know on the surface, what does that really mean? All these different categories of training, technology, accountability, we have to show we're meeting the court's orders by that level. We have now increased all of them above 50%, and in one lane, we were actually at 12% when I took office, and we're at 72, so we've gained 60 points. We still have a ways to go. So I'm talking about our successes because in the last year, we've probably accomplished more than the previous 4 years combined. But we've had setbacks too. You know, as an example, one of the categories is we have to identify behaviors that are outside a pattern leading to concern, meaning if all of your peers, when they conduct traffic stops, there's kind of a ratio to that, but for some individuals it appears as though they're targeting a specific group, we have to look into it to make sure there's no bias, there's no racism in that. And the court set a date for us to accomplish these things. It's really a sophisticated investigation, and we didn't hit our deadlines, and it was due to just how cumbersome the responsibilities are. So we're working with the court and the ACLU and the DOJ to make sure we meet their expectations. And why do I share that? Because of transparency. We've made great gains, and I could brag on those, but I need to talk about areas we need to improve. So the deficiency isn't because of lack of effort, lack of skill, or lack of commitment. It's just more so we're learning that process still, and we've had some staffing setbacks which we need to supplement to overcome it. So I think we're making progress, but again, it's patience. Mike, we're going to spend $25 million this year. That was required by the court long before I took office in regards to Melendrez, and it will continue for a few years down the road. But I can tell you that one of the judge's statements and that the plaintiff's class agreed with was just the fact that they see a higher quality relative to what is ordered from the office, and they're thankful. They're happy about that. I should say thankful, but they're happy about that. They're not happy about the areas that we're still deficient.
So ICE in the jails, there was a bit of a controversy of how ICE was going to come in and pick up people that were on immigration hold orders, which the courts were saying you can't do that. When there's a release date, you've got to release them. What are we doing to make sure that if there are dangerous people, they don't hit the streets, that they get turned over in a lawful way to the federal government, and how is that working now?
So ICE has access in the front end of the jail and the back end of the jail, and they're getting to 100% of our detainees, and they'll be able to review if their status is questionable, flag them, and take them before they leave. So I can tell you from my perspective, and I haven't heard anything in conflict from ICE, it's working as designed. Oddly enough, though, for some who are concerned, if we talk about the right, they say, why won't you hold them? We're facilitating their success, which is identifying the people that they want to consider for deportation. And on the far left, they're saying, how dare you keep ICE in the jails? So there are some factions that are unhappy because they want more. But you know where we're at, Mike? We're in the lawful lane where we should be. And that lawful lane means that if you are here unlawfully and you've committed an additional crime while in this country, that ICE will have access to you and make the determination if they want to process you for deportation. We will not participate because by law we cannot. But the agency that is empowered to do so can. And so last week we had a community meeting, which is required by the court every quarter, and it is intended to focus on the plaintiff's class, which is primarily those that were mistreated under the previous sheriff by the orders of the judge. So it is primarily the Latino community. We had 500 attendees. Before I took office, there were about 10 or 15. So there were 500 people in attendance, and I would tell you it was a great success in many ways. But the one thing that was, for me, disappointing is the loudest voices oftentimes are the activists that we hear from often. And I will listen to them, and I will have conversations and respect where they stand. But it's the other part, the big part of the people that attended who were never heard, that we need to give them more of our attention, because for the first time they're coming out, they're talking about their concerns, they have certain needs, and we're being lawful, and we're meeting them in the middle, and we're trying to rebuild that relationship and restore it. But it's another area, it's a growing pain. Far right, far left, they're going to complain about certain issues that are issues for them. But the lawful lane and the majority of the people up the middle is where we're focusing our energy and our time, and I think we're making great strides.
The concern is we're going to turn into a sanctuary county or whatever we see in San Francisco, where they're refusing to work with the federal government. And you're saying you're working with them as long as it's lawful and it's not against a local judge's order when it comes time to release someone.
Correct. And I don't think, when we talk about sanctuary city, I see nothing from my perspective as a law enforcement professional that gives any indication that we are acting in a manner that reflects other areas where we hear that they have so-called sanctuary cities. Every agency is enforcing the law under their own authority, which their powers allow them to do. There's a collaboration of these efforts where the crossover may be between federal law and state law. We're making sure that we stay in our lane, but we facilitate safety on behalf of the other agencies. So if that's an issue or concern here in this community, I'm unaware of it, because we're doing everything we can to address it and just enforce the laws. Objectively, impartial, and we're not allowing racial profiling or bias or violation of the Constitution in any way for anyone.
Well, as you know, Maricopa County, very huge in land mass, from the very urban areas to the very rural areas, with 750 deputies. How many corrections officers? 2,000
detention officers, 750 deputies, and 750 civilian staff, so 3,500 total. But we're working right now with the Board of Supervisors to determine how we can expand and grow the organization without it being a burden to our taxpayers. But as the population grows, obviously there's more tax opportunities. I shouldn't say tax opportunities, that's the wrong way to frame it. There's more revenue coming in because of the greater population. So with all the Maricopa County entities that fall under the Board of Supervisors, they're being very responsible to make determinations on how we can continue to grow in all areas.
Sheriff of Maricopa County, Paul Penzone, thanks for coming down.
Always a pleasure.
We'll be back.